Good afternoon. Welcome to the National Press Club. My name is Sonia Hilgren. I am president of the National Press Club and editor of Farm Journal. I'd like to welcome club members and their guests in the audience today, as well as those of you watching on C-SPAN or listening on National Public Radio or the Global Internet Computer Network. Before introducing our head table, I'd like to remind our members of upcoming speakers. On Friday, March 8th, Senator Alan Simpson, Republican from Wyoming, will reflect on the state of Congress as he leaves the Senate. On Thursday, March 14th, Mike Wallace of CBS News' 60 Minutes will be speaker at our annual Freedom of Information Day luncheon. His topic will be corporate influence and freedom of the press. And on Friday, March 15th, John Bruton, the Prime Minister of Ireland, will be on hand to talk about the Northern Ireland peace process. Transcripts and audio and video tapes of Press Club luncheons are available by calling 1-800-NPC-2334. If you have any questions for our speaker, please write them on the cards provided at your tables and pass them up to me. I will ask as many as time permits. I would now like to introduce our head table guests and ask them to stand briefly when their names are called. From your right, Larry Williams, Technology Editor, Knight Ridder Newspapers. Kara Swisher, Washington Post. Steve Wildstrom, Business Week. Rod Cookrow, Editor-in-Chief, Multimedia Publishing Group. Catherine Applefield Olson, Telecom Publishing Group. Walt Mossberg, Wall Street Journal. Peggy Robertson, freelance journalist and chairman of the National Press Club Speakers Committee. Mark Lewin, Business Week. Jack Reynolds Communications, and member of the National Press Club Speakers Committee who arranged today's luncheon. Steve Ginsburg, Reuters. Catherine Hobson, Bloomberg Business News, and Larry Bivens, Detroit News. Our guest today is one of the custodians of cyberspace. Steve Case runs America Online, the largest of the online services. He's far from your stereotypical computer nerd. A native Hawaiian with a political science degree from Williams College, he honed his marketing skills at Pepsi and Procter & Gamble, flogging Frito-Lays and Pizza Hut. In the last year, he has doubled the number of his avid cyber customers to over 5 million. His worldwide expansion of AOL has not been without problems. There have been pornography issues in Germany. Closer to home, AOL has joined more than 20 corporate and trade organizations in a major legal move against the new Communications Decency Act, which is part of the 1996 Telecommunications Act recently signed by President Clinton. Many feel this law violates freedom of speech in cyberspace. There are other hurdles in Mr. Case's roller coaster online world. His two major competitors are on the auction block. Sears has announced that it would like to unload half of Prodigy. IBM owns the other half. And H&R Block wants to spin off CompuServe. Why this turmoil in what has been a fast-growing part of the information superhighway? As the World Wide Web becomes easier to navigate through direct internet access providers, customers may find it easier to bypass online services. Wall Street doesn't exactly know what to make of this novel world of cyberspace. As a consequence, the tech stocks have soared and plunged in yo-yo moves that have financial analysts in cardiac arrest. Not too long ago, AOL's short position, those market wizards betting against Mr. Case, numbered 15.2 million shares. The stakes are high in Steve Case's world. Recently, the worth of his shares in AOL dropped $30 million in a week. That's almost as much as Steve Forbes has spent in pursuit of the presidency. But he's just an old-fashioned linear magazine publisher. And if that weren't enough to mess up anyone's modem, AT&T, the potential Darth Vader of the online galaxy, announced it would be providing low-cost internet access to its 80 million residential and 10 million business customers. The question for Wall Street and AOL stockholders is Steve Case Luke Skywalker? In the midst of this chaos, Steve Case just keeps moving along, snagging new subscribers, buying smaller, innovative online service and technology companies, getting sponsors to host AOL's most popular features, making online ads more attractive, and putting out his reassuring down-home letters to AOL customers and shareholders. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the National Press Club, America Online President Steve Case.
Well, thank you very much. That was quite an introduction. I think it covered most of the key points I was going to talk about. So there'll be some consistency between the introduction and my comments. We started our company over a decade ago when there was not a lot of interest in online services. In fact, there was virtually no interest in the concept. People thought it was sort of this hobbyist, computer nerd sort of thing. But we had a belief then, and we have a belief now, that over time what would happen was the development of a new medium which would ultimately be as important as radio was or television was or magazines have been. But it would take a long time for us to build the kind of the roadblocks to get from where we were to where we needed to go. And we've seen that over the past decade. We now see the promise of this medium, and certainly many of you are leading the way and talking about the possibilities of this medium, but there still are a lot of hurdles to make this a mainstream phenomenon. The reality is, despite all the press, all the hoopla, all the enthusiasm from our company and others, that only about 10% of the households in the United States subscribe to any online service, any internet access provider, anything. And 90% are sitting on the sidelines saying, why bother? So the challenge for us over the next decade is to reach out to this group that has so far not seen the wisdom of joining this interactive revolution and provide them with a solution that makes it something that they really see as an integral and compelling part of their everyday life. So we've made good progress, but there's still a long road ahead. What makes this medium so exciting to us is that it really is unique if you look at it in a historical context, that it is more interactive and more participatory than other things that we've seen. Interactive in the sense that you can really have control over what you get and when you get it and how you get it. It kind of puts everybody in the driver's seat, becoming a kind of a producer or an editor. At the same time, it's more participatory. It's not just about people talking to you. It's about you interacting with each other and exchanging ideas on topics that you think are important. And the concept of more interactive and more participatory are really the building blocks of this new medium. What I thought I'd do today is give you our perspective on what has happened and also what is likely to happen as we make this march towards the mainstream, and also raise with you some of the challenges that we face as we look ahead into this mainstream kind of audience. The two key areas I think to focus on, and it's been true for the past decade, I don't see any reason why it will change over the next decade, is the key drivers of this are a real obsession on consumers and what they want and how they want it, and not getting too caught up in the latest press release, the latest announcements, the latest technology, the latest this, the latest that, figuring out what consumers want and trying to stay really close to them. And also recognizing this requires a spirit of partnership, that no company can do this alone. It really requires people working together. That's been the history in the last few years. Now it requires broadening that tent and bringing new constituencies in, including the government and other groups that have an interest as this moves towards the mainstream and as it goes from being kind of a niche phenomenon to more of a mass phenomenon. There's lots of issues that are being raised now and will be raised in the next few years. So we need to expand that tapestry of alliances and open the tent to a much broader range of constituencies than we've seen so far. It appears that there are 5 principal challenges to focus on here, to try to look at this in a more strategic kind of fashion. The first is creating a really extraordinary experience. That ultimately is what drives a lot of this, and we'll talk about that. The second is figuring out how to integrate this medium into society, so it really is a core part of society as opposed to something sitting on the sidelines. The third, which is sort of related, is to establish new legal and regulatory frameworks that recognize the potential of this medium, but also the challenges because it is so unique versus things that people have seen in the past. The fourth is to develop new business models so everybody participating in this business throughout the value chain can do it in a successful and profitable fashion. And the fifth is to use technology to really enable and empower and drive this revolution, but recognizing that technology is really a piece of the puzzle, not the puzzle itself. And in fact, consumers don't really care about the underlying technologies. They're much more interested in what they're going to get than how they're going to get it. So we need to make sure as we move to a more mainstream audience that we don't forget that the best services may mask that technology as opposed to really highlighting it. Now, if you look at what's happened the last couple of years, it really has been extraordinary. AOL is a good proxy for this, but there's been other success stories as well. 2 years ago, we had 500,000 subscribers. Today, we have over 5 million subscribers. So we've added 4.5 million subscribers in the past 2 years. And to put that in some context in terms of media properties, that means in the last 2 years, we've added more new subscribers than USA Today and New York Times and Wall Street Journal have added over the past 100 years. So there is consumer interest in this phenomenon. It's no longer kind of something that's hiding in the corner, and people who are really enthusiastic about their computers do this on weekends because they have nothing better to do. This is now a core part of many people's lives, and I travel around a fair amount and often encounter people that surprise me that they're already part of this revolution, already usually subscribing to AOL, which of course makes me happy. But there's lots of other people on a global basis that are connected to this interactive medium, and many through the internet. The numbers there are kind of all over the map, ranging from 10 million or so users to 30 million or so. Usually the difference is whether they're just using something like email or using broader services like World Wide Web access. But there's no question that this is no longer a millions kind of phenomenon. It's quickly becoming a tens of millions kind of phenomenon. And the reason for that are those attributes I mentioned before. It is unique, it is interactive, it is participatory, it is moving on a fairly rapid global scale, and is going to sit next to television and radio and newspapers and magazines and other kinds of media as an integral part of many people's daily lives. So the challenge is to figure out how to do that. It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it. We've been working on this for the past decade. We've made some progress, but we do recognize there's still an extraordinarily long way to go to really get the kind of mainstream phenomenon that we think is so possible. And the key, as I said, is focusing on consumers. That really sometimes gets lost in the sea of announcements because there's so many different things happening, usually interesting in a vacuum, but sometimes lacking a context that brings it all together so that your friends who live down the street or your relatives or your mother can figure out why this service is so important to their everyday life. The guiding principles at America Online have focused on what we call the 6 C's, which are content, context, community, connectivity, commerce, and cost. And recently, recognizing that the market was shifting into more of a mainstream mode, we've added 2 new ones, which are controls and customer service. So I'll touch briefly on these because they really are central to understanding what's going to drive this from a 10% household penetration kind of phenomenon to more of a mainstream phenomenon. Now, content is certainly important. There's some people who say content is king. We think that's probably a little extreme because in this new world, all of these things are important piece parts. And indeed, none of them are as effective on a standalone basis as they are in an integrated basis, which is the way consumers see it. But consumers certainly want access to a broad range of content. They want access to brands they already know and trust. They want it to be as easy as possible to get in and get around. In this area of content, we have seen a dramatic shift in the past couple of years from a world which was really mostly about existing brands, the existing newspaper brands and magazine brands that people already knew and trust, to a growing number of new brands that are being created by entrepreneurs who are really quite obsessed about the possibilities of this new medium. Now, that's not to say that the media companies aren't playing that same role. We're actually partnering with a number of them to create joint ventures. The key idea here is not whether it's an old brand or new brand, but that a new perspective, taking advantage of the power of this medium and leveraging this aspect of interactivity and participation, is really brought to the table, and it's not simply about shoving data through a new pipe. So this content is important. People expect breadth, and they get it. And increasingly now, they also get it by having this wider array of content available on the World Wide Web. So there's lots of content, and it's growing at a rather exponential pace. The recent estimates say there's over 100,000 websites, for example. So there's plenty of content out there, and it is getting better. The second is context. If there are 100,000 choices, it gets kind of confusing, particularly to the average consumer. They really don't know how to pick between this sports service or that news service or this financial service. They need some guiding function. If you just imagine the world of television, For a long time, there's 3 or 4 networks. Now there's dozens of networks. Many people find the dozens of networks a little bit bewildering. A few years ago, everybody was talking about 500 channels, and people thought, my, 500 channels, how would you ever surf through 500 channels to find what you're looking for? You just constantly be clicking that remote control button. Well, this is not about a handful of channels or dozens of channels or even 500 channels. This is about hundreds of thousands of channels, someday millions of channels. And how do you make sense of that? How do you bring a sense of order to what otherwise most consumers will find a chaotic kind of business? And that's what context is all about, making sense of this so you provide a guide function and you can point people in the direction of services that's most likely to meet their needs. And you can provide some quality control function because a lot of people really are looking for that helping hand. And indeed, the 90% that aren't yet participating in this medium are going to need that helping hand more than anybody else. So that's this business of context, presentation and personalization and packaging to really make it a mainstream kind of phenomenon. The next aspect is community, and we've always believed that a powerful part of this medium was building a sense of community. In some respects, AOL with 5 million members is almost like a society. It's like a city, and indeed, if it was a city in the United States, it would be among the largest cities in the country. And we want to promote a sense of community. We want to promote a sense of connectedness so people really feel part of the service. We want them to feel it's their service, not our service, and we want them to join in discussions on topics they care most about and participate. So it's not just about reading information on a screen. It's also about interacting with others in this participatory fashion. The fourth aspect is connectivity, and this is less glamorous than some of the other ones, but really quite important. People need to be able to connect to a service like AOL by dialing a local number, and not getting a busy signal, getting in, and being able to wander through the service in a highly reliable kind of fashion. That's why in the past year we've spent a fair amount of time and energy and money building out AOLNet, our own network, which really allowed us to put a footprint in place so that most of our customers can connect. And we're focusing a lot on this connectivity aspect. It's really quite critical. The fifth is commerce, and this is only now emerging because the audience reach of the industry, and AOL in particular, is only to the point where we have critical mass where this is possible. But if you imagine a world where everybody was connected, which we're not at today, but someday may be at, it will really fundamentally reshape the way people get information and communicate with other people and buy products, and that as they buy products, there's new ways to distribute information to help guide their decisions and new ways to purchase those products and purchase those services, which really stimulates this whole market of electronic commerce, which is quite important because that will ultimately be a major driver in the profitability of this medium. The sixth aspect is cost. We've always believed that simple, affordable pricing is important. People don't want to have to make a lot of decisions. They want to have a pricing structure they understand, and that's been proven time and time again. The two new areas we've added are controls. This is a new phenomenon in the past year, a growing sense in a lot of different constituencies that as you bring this more to the mainstream, you have to empower people to take control of the medium, and particularly to take control of the medium for the needs of their own household. So we have developed, and other companies have as well, tools to make that happen, things we call parental controls, for example, that allows everybody to customize the service to meet their own particular needs. It's really quite critical as we move more mainstream. And the final aspect is customer service. Again, if you're going after the 90% that isn't presently plugged in, you have to do a better job than we've done so far in reaching out and helping them get connected in the first place, and when they have questions, helping them with those questions. We now have over 2,500 people around the country who are just focused on that one thing, trying to provide superior customer service. So that's the aspect of really making this a consumer phenomenon. One of the missing ingredients right now is a disconnect between what technologically is possible and what consumers are pragmatically able to do. And it's particularly true when you think of bandwidth. Bandwidth is basically the speed at which you can deliver services. And a lot of interesting things are happening that require higher bandwidth than most consumers have. And the World Wide Web is one example of that. I think most would agree that in order to get full value out of the World Wide Web, you need to be connected with a modem speed of at least 28.8, and ideally ISDN or cable modems. And there's lots of enthusiasm about the possibility of this higher bandwidth communications, which sounds good in a vacuum. But if you then go look in the real world, the majority of consumers have slower modems. They have 14.4 modems or 9600 modems, which basically means a lot of the things that you read about and hear about, you're not going to be able to use with your computer and your modem today. And indeed, most computers sold today, if you go to a computer store tonight and try to buy a computer, the vast majority will have 14.4 modems. So there's a real important need to bridge the possibilities with the realities to make sure we can reach a mainstream audience. The next challenge is really integrating this within society, not having it be its own little business sitting over here, but really having it more embedded throughout our everyday lives. And there's lots of challenges there that are really just emerging. And indeed, as an industry, I think we're all now recognizing the importance of taking the lead in defining these aspects as opposed to letting others do it for us. One is an area of access, that there are problems with potentially with haves and have-nots, where some people have access to these services and others do not. And there's lots of things that can be done there in terms of public-private partnerships. One that's happening this weekend that AOL is participating in, along with many other companies, is called Net Day, which is in California, wiring all the schools together to provide internet access, and we're providing AOL for free. We're doing the same thing in the empowerment zones all over the country, going into the most disadvantaged neighborhoods and providing free AOL access. But that's really the tip of the iceberg of the kind of things we need to do to bridge this gap. There also are significant issues in terms of this idea of censoring content, and it's a very hot debate in Washington and other places. Our view, and it's shared by many within the industry, is the right approach is to empower people through tools to allow them to customize this content for their own particular families, and to supplement that with some kind of standard that is enforceable. And we've been arguing for a harmful to minor standards as opposed to the current indecency standard, which we think is a little vague and probably unenforceable. There are lots of these kinds of issues that are just now surfacing, and it's sort of a good news, bad news thing. It's bad news because they're complicated and hard to deal with. It's good news because it basically means this medium is arriving, and it's starting to move mainstream, and people are starting to take it seriously and thinking about it from a public policy standpoint, not just in this country, but on a global basis. So it really is a kind of a mixed blessing. One of the issues that we're particularly dealing with is in Europe right now, and it was referenced earlier in Germany, where a particular country has certain laws about certain kinds of content, and that kind of runs right up against the internet and this global connectivity where everybody can sort of be a publisher, and the information is distributed quite broadly and quite difficult to control. It's those kind of issues that really require a measured and deliberate kind of response, trying to recognize the power of this medium, but also trying to be sensitive to local laws, local customs, and so forth. That is really quite important. But the censorship issue, I think, is going to be one of the hot issues over the next year or two. I'd just like to give you one perspective of somebody by the name of Philippe Kahn, who some of you may know, is a founder of Borland, a software company, and recently wrote, as part of a censorship discussion on the internet last week, a story that I thought was really quite touching, which is when he was a young child, he was beaten up by a number of kids who called themselves, in France, keepers of the great Aryan principles. And he said the boys told him that the Holocaust was a fabrication. And Philippe's mother, who was marked by death camp tattoos, told her son, who was quite troubled by this, "For centuries, our people have been the victims of intolerance. The price of our freedom is the burden of having to accept the worst in public expression. For he who starts censorship will never know where and when to stop." So this is a very difficult, very sensitive issue. It requires a dialogue through a lot of different groups to try to figure out what the right balance is for this medium, which really leads to the next challenge, which is the legal and regulatory kind of framework. The knee-jerk response here is to try to pigeonhole it into some existing framework. It's either a common carrier, or it's a cable operator, it's a broadcaster, it's a programmer, it's something that we already have rules for, because that would be kind of the easy way to do it. And in truth, there are always bits and pieces that are, in fact, similar between this new interactive medium and some existing forms of media where there's already kind of clear rules of the road. But this is a new medium, and it does require a new perspective. And we're really calling for a new framework that recognizes the uniqueness of this medium and tries to learn from the past, but move ahead towards the future with a unique perspective that really allows you to take full advantage of this medium as it moves to a mainstream audience on a global basis. The fourth challenge was developing these new business models so that this medium can be profitable for all the different participants. And our history in the past 10 years has been that conventional wisdom has usually been wrong. And ultimately, consumers did what they wanted, not what they were supposed to do. And I suspect the same will be true in the future. 10 years ago when we got started, everybody paid for online services. Everybody is probably a little expansive because there's only thousands of users at the time. But the model was pay as you go, pay for each hour of access. Nobody was charging monthly subscription fees. And we introduced the concept of monthly subscription fees, which allowed you to load in a lot of value, and that's now kind of the industry standard. Everybody believed 10 years ago that this business would be driven by electronic publishing, an electronic newspaper, basically taking the existing product and distributing it in electronic fashion. Nobody fathomed that this idea of electronic community would be far more important than electronic publishing. 5 years ago, there was a real growth around the idea of niche services, that maybe people don't need one of these broad-based services, maybe they just need a game service, maybe they just need a financial service, these customized niche services. That didn't work too well. A couple of years ago, there was a focus on a la carte pricing for branded content, that maybe this was a newsstand and everything was going to cost $5 a month, and you kind of surf around and decide which things you want to subscribe to and subscribe to those on an a la carte basis, a little bit like pay-per-view television. Pay-per-view television didn't work so well, and a la carte pricing hasn't worked too well either. So again, consumers seem to do what they want, not what they're supposed to. Our view has remained reasonably consistent through this, which is the pricing needs to be simple, the pricing needs to be affordable. You need to figure out a way to reach out to a wide audience. Basic cable television, where you get a lot of the major channels, MTV and CNN and Nickelodeon and so forth, built in as part of that service fee is an important aspect. Then you build a large audience, and then you develop new revenue streams for all your partners because you have a large audience. That continues to be the path we're headed down. We also are making much more significant investments in original content. As I said before, we don't want this just to be about repurposing content from the past. We want to create new content for the future. It feels a little bit like reading some history about television in the 1950s, where the first couple of years, people had cameras basically filming people reading radio scripts. And that sort of seemed interesting at the time because television was so intriguing. But in fact, what really drove it into the mainstream was programming that took advantage of the power of television and therefore moved into an area where there's much broader appeal than simply reading the radio scripts. For the most part, the online world today is still in the reading the radio script stage, and we want to move from that stage into a stage where there is much more of a hotbed of innovation, and we can attract the most creative minds and the best entrepreneurs to focus over the next decade on creating services that really can have broad appeal. And the fifth challenge is really trying to make technology serve consumers and really recognize that technology is a central enabler of this revolution, while at the same time not getting too caught up in the possibilities of this widget or that widget. There are lots of things that need to be assembled to make this work, but consumers would much prefer that as an industry we kind of downplay that aspect and somehow plug it together to make it work for them. They really want to push a button and be up and running and not have to learn a lot about the language of technology that's true today, whether it be bandwidth issues, which we talked about, or ease of use issues, or network issues, or security or privacy issues. There's lots of these things that need to get attention, but we need to do that as an industry in a way that does not confuse consumers, but instead they can view it as a real enabler and a powerful aspect of this medium. Another point that I should mention, because if I don't proactively, I know I'll get a lot of questions on it in the Q&A, I probably will anyway, is this burning question that I hear all the time: what is the role of online services versus the internet? They seem to be on this kind of collision course in the view of a lot of people. We have never viewed the internet as competition. We view the internet as a set of technologies, HTML, HTTP, SSL, there's lots of alphabet soup in the internet, and also as a platform for software development and content development. But those are building blocks. The question is, how do you build on those to really reach a mainstream audience that someday we want to be tens of millions of people? And that's what AOL is all about, building on those aspects. We are the leading internet access provider. We by far have more customers connected to the internet than any other source, but we also go beyond being purely an internet access provider to try to add value up and down the value chain, because we think there's lots of things that we can do and we need to do to make this a ready for prime time kind of service, whether it be bundled pricing or optimizing for slow modem speeds or original content. There's lots of things that are happening, and all the packaging of this to really reach your neighbors and your relatives that really drives AOL's success, and I think will in the future as well. So we sense there's a window of opportunity here. There is growing interest in this phenomenon of online services, phenomenon of internet. Consumers are kind of coming out of their dens and saying, I want to try this thing. I've kind of been on the fence for a little while. I'm not quite sure exactly what it is, but I'm now curious. And we need to figure out a way to welcome them to the party, make it as easy as possible for them, and to try to point them in the direction of the services that most meet their needs, while focusing not just on consumers, but also on this aspect of partnerships that I've mentioned several times, that we've learned the hard way over the past decade that it really does require cooperation. Now we're moving into a new phase where it's not just cooperation within our little industry with software companies and telephone companies and so forth, but in a broader societal context, not just in this country, but on a global basis, and that we really need to bring that perspective to this in order to reach the ultimate potential of this medium, which is really to have it sitting alongside television, radio as a major mass phenomenon that tens of millions of people participate in every day and find significant value on. And it really does, the promise that we've always been pursuing of really empowering people so they can get information in new ways, they can communicate in new ways, they can learn things in new ways, they can buy products and services in new ways. It really is an important part of their lives. That's what we've been doing for the past 10 years and we'll be doing for I suspect, many decades to come. With that, I'd like to open it up for your questions.
Close to the end of your talk, you mentioned radio and television. But what's the future of your linear competitors, like newspapers and magazines, in the next 5, 10, 15 years, 20, 25?
Well, there's always been a presumption in history that new things would somehow kill old things, and it's never been the case. That television, for example, was supposed to kill radio. It obviously did not. Cable television was supposed to kill network television. It obviously did not. So there's always been a path of progress where new things emerged that may have altered what some of the existing things did, but that didn't fundamentally eliminate them. Newspapers, I think the real question is, how do they define their business? Almost all the newspaper companies that I'm familiar with have a fairly strategic perspective, which is that this is not just about printing things on newsprint and delivering it to people's doorsteps. They're more about a brand that people trust and being able to obtain lots of information from lots of different sources and organize it in a way that mainstream America can understand and appreciate. And the way they actually deliver that service to their consumers doesn't really matter, whether it be in a printed form or electronic form. Those brands, I think, will continue to be trusted, particularly in the sea of choices. If there are millions of channels, people are going to be more likely to seek out the New York Times service or the Wall Street Journal service than they are the Steve Case service.
Aren't you trying to get your brand to be one of those brands? Anyway, when you mentioned going into the information providing service yourself, and so could you tell us a little bit more about your providing of news and entertainment content? Does this mean more online publications without paper cousins, maybe?
Well, first of all, following up on the earlier question, we are not creating brands that compete with newspapers, for example. We are partnering with a lot of companies to make that happen. We're not in the business of gathering news. We don't have a single reporter out there gathering news. What we are in the business of doing is trying to aggregate together information to meet the needs of a particular audience, and we partner with as many companies as we possibly can to accomplish that objective. We don't believe that we're particularly experts in anything. We think the real magic of AOL is how we bring together all these different components, these different piece parts to create an engaging, interactive experience for millions of people. But in order to do that, we have to partner with lots of different companies throughout the value chain. And some of the, in terms of magazines and newspapers, I think some of the real magic over the next decade will be hybrid offerings that really leverage print as a launching pad into an online world, so that you may read about something in a newspaper or in a magazine and want to learn more, want to discuss that with others, and move to the online service. That these things will work better in tandem than they each will work separately.
With all this partnering, are we journalists all going to be working with or for you and Bill Gates someday?
No.
America Online was among those warning a year ago that the bundling of Microsoft Network into Windows 95 was a major threat to competitors of online services. Obviously, this didn't happen. Why not?
Well, it hasn't happened yet. I think the issue we raised a year ago is an issue we still have a concern about today, which is to the extent a single company has a monopoly position in something as central as operating systems, which we think of operating systems for computers sort of like dial tone is for telephones, then how they leverage that monopoly into new businesses strikes us as being a serious public policy issue. I would say the reason it hasn't had more of an impact to date is really two things. One is Windows 95 has been quite successful, probably a little less successful than some people thought, that the minority of home computers presently run Windows 95. That will increase over time, and as it does increase, the threat will increase. And the second is, ultimately, this is a services business where every month people make a decision about what service to subscribe to, and the Microsoft network got off to a fairly slow start in terms of providing an interactive experience that met the needs of consumers in these areas I talked about: content and context and community and so forth. So that the combination of that monopoly marketing power with a really terrific service, I think, could have resulted in a different kind of outcome. But it's never over till it's over. We have a lot of respect for Microsoft, and we think they will be a major force in this market.
What is your view of the slowly emerging interactive television industry, and how might it grow to affect AOL and other online services?
Again, our view is trying to the extent we can, try to stay close to the consumer view. The consumer view is there's this thing called interactivity, and that they read a lot about it. To the extent they're using it, they almost always are using an online service like AOL or CompuServe or Prodigy. That the other things they've read about, such as interactive television, are still more concept than reality. There are a few tests in a few cities, but it's not a broad-based phenomenon. But the way I think consumers will continue to view it is, how do you participate in this interactive world? And over time, there's no question they'll move beyond personal computers to other kinds of access devices, and the television will certainly be one. Screen telephones will be another. And also will move beyond telephone networks to other kinds of networks, whether they be cable networks or wireless networks. And the challenge for our industry is to knit these technologies together and these interactive experiences together in a way that can have broad consumer appeal, as opposed to view them as a kind of niche phenomenon and have them separate islands that are disconnected, which I think will confuse consumers and slow the overall adoption of these interactive services.
The rural readers of my magazine often have to pay long-distance charges that are prohibitive, but that is changing rapidly. When will all rural areas, that is the entire country, some 60 million people who live in rural areas, be able to have financially competitive access to the World Wide Web and online services?
Well, I think it is changing rapidly. In our own plans, we now have AOLNet, our own network, in over 300 cities that account for about 80% of the population of the country. The 20% that we are not yet serving, we are adding additional capacity all the time. We also have recently made available an 800 number option that is surcharged, but does allow people, whether they're traveling or living in a rural area, to connect in AOL. Another phenomenon that's happening is the growth of these niche access providers, and a lot of them are developing markets that don't presently have much competition. So a lot of these rural areas will be served by access providers who then will want to partner with companies like AOL to provide their consumers with a unified experience.
For those of us in Washington, there is a new AOL service called Digital City, which has restaurant information and just about anything that movie information, weather information, and such. What details can you tell us about Digital City as far as the number of users, revenues derived from advertising, success in replacing the Post's digital ink, which is their digital version? And might this digital city wipe out some of the local newspaper franchises? And how can you be a partner when you're going at newspapers like that?
Well, we would have loved to work with the Washington Post in Washington. We'd love to work with every newspaper in every market as we build these local services. Our view is there's a global aspect to this, a national aspect, and a local aspect that need to work together in a relatively unified way. AOL is the brand we're establishing within this country and also now launching in Europe and later in Asia to try to establish AOL as the leading brand in cyberspace. We recently launched a second brand called GNN targeting this internet access market, and we launched Digital City as sort of a local affiliate. Just as the television business had national umbrella networks, NBC and CBS and so forth, and local affiliates, we think the same model will likely emerge in the online world. And we set up Digital City as a separate entity and will be doing ventures with lots of different companies in each market to try to put together the right mix of partners to make these local affiliate options really viable.
Why should an editorial content provider, I guess that's a magazine or a newspaper, affiliate with AOL rather than establishing an independent worldwide website?
Well, I'd say they're not mutually exclusive. I think a lot of companies will do both. The difference is if you create a service for AOL, it's likely optimized for the audience that we presently have. Some of the things I talked about in terms of the technologies we've added to make the service more engaging and more useful and more fun for people with typical hardware configurations and modem configurations and so forth, I think will result in your service getting used more. We have a model that allows us to collect revenue from our customers, so you'll get paid a royalty based on usage of the area, and we have a critical mass of 5 million customers that will allow you to develop advertising and transaction revenue streams. Creating a website is a necessary but not sufficient condition to creating a business, because if there are hundreds of thousands of options, somehow people have to find your service, and net surfing and serendipitously running into it is not going to build a significant audience that builds reach and frequency that allows you to build an advertising model. You'll need to build an audience. I think if you need to build an audience, the quickest way to do that is partner with an AOL or Prodigy or CompuServe or Microsoft or somebody that can bring you that audience in a relatively rapid fashion. This issue of marketing and promotion, I think, is really quite underestimated. This is not just about technology. It is true that the barriers to entry to create content have dropped significantly, that really everybody can now become a content creator. It is true that the barriers to get distribution have dropped considerably. Everybody can have their site on the World Wide Web, so the traditional barriers in the newspaper industry where you needed printing presses don't exist, and the traditional barriers in the cable industry where you needed channel capacity don't exist. But from a broad-based perspective, the ability to build an audience is going to get harder, not easier, and it's our belief that there will be a handful of major services on a global scale that will have the wherewithal to develop this new business model that shifts the burden away from subscribers to other kinds of partners, and that if you're not participating with one of those major services, you're going to have a difficult time being successful in this new world of interactive services.
Along those same lines, will AT&T's offer of free internet access be a threat to AOL's dominance of online services? And can you foresee AOL becoming a completely free service like broadcast television, with revenues primarily coming from advertisers and marketers?
Well, first of all, I don't think AOL dominates anything. We're the leader in an emerging market, and there's lots of issues that need to be addressed as an industry to really reach a mainstream kind of audience, as I mentioned. In terms of AT&T specifically, I think time will tell. Right now, they are providing one piece of the puzzle, which is access. Consumers want a more integrated puzzle, and particularly the 90% that's not yet served need a more integrated puzzle. And some of these so-called access providers trying to provide internet dial tone, and it won't just be AT&T, it'll be Sprint and MCI, it'll be Pacific Bell and Bell Atlantic, it'll be TCI and Comcast and the cable industry. Everybody will want to be the internet dial tone. I suspect some number of those will end up being natural allies for AOL as we marry our brand and package of services and value and community and context and content with their access. So some of the people that might be perceived as competitors might turn out to be partners. It's always been our view, and will continue to be our view, that everybody is a potential partner until they shoot at us.
Do you get the impression that Wall Street doesn't really understand the technology stocks, the online world, the internet, World Wide Web?
Well, I think it's hard to generalize. There's some people in Wall Street I think understand it very well, and some people have a very kind of peripheral understanding of it, which is to be expected because there's so many different industries and companies to follow. I do think that over the next year there will be a little bit more of a unified view among Wall Street experts in terms of how this medium is developing, where the value is being created, and which companies ultimately will be the big successes. But I would expect over the next few months and probably at least the next year, still a lot of volatility and a lot of roller coasterness as people are making some assumptions about how this might play out, and ultimately it's going to be a function of what consumers decide, not what I decide or you decide or they decide.
Would you comment on the explosion of interest in the Motley Fool, the stock picking service that's a big hit on AOL?
Well, for those of you who don't understand, Motley Fool is a couple of guys who were in a garage a year and a half ago who were publishing a fairly limited circulation newsletter that they mailed to some people who were curious about their views of the market. And they decided they wanted to try to create a service on AOL that really brought some of that same perspective, but married some of these other aspects of interactive and participatory. And we launched that a little over a year ago, and it was a terrific success. And it really showed you the power of creativity, of entrepreneurs with an idea married to this new medium. It really emerged as a very successful service on AOL, really quite quickly. Some of that is because we believed in them and promoted them, which supports the point I made about the importance of marketing and promotion. In the TV network world, where there's really 4 networks, if you talk to producers in Hollywood who had a unsuccessful series, they almost always blame it on the network in terms of when they were scheduled or how much they were promoted. And that's with a relatively small number of choices. In this world of hundreds of thousands or millions of choices, what gets promoted will play an important role. But it has to be coupled with terrific, creative, engaging, exciting, innovative content, and building the sense of community and sense of connectedness. And the Motley Fool entrepreneurs are a good example of that. And it's also a good example of new brands emerging out of this online world and then marching into more of a mainstream audience. They recently published a book with Simon & Schuster that's already selling quite well. I would not be at all surprised to see them have their own television show someday, sort of like a Louis Rukeyser for this next generation. So it shows you the power of this medium and creativity married together.
Do you plan to offer banking services online?
Yes, we do plan to. We actually have already started that process, working directly with some banks like Bank of America, but also partnering with Intuit through their Quicken offering is now by far the leader in check registers and bill paying, and we're partnering with a number of groups such as Intuit to try to take that service and make it part of our offering as well, because our belief is that consumers prefer one-stop shopping. They prefer going through one interface they know and can trust, paying one bill, calling one number. They'd rather get all of these services married together in a unified way than have to learn each service, learn each interface, and learn how to subscribe and use each of these offerings. So the more we can bundle together under the AOL brand, the better off we are, and the more customers we have, the better we're able to do that, because we've seen this big get bigger kind of dynamic over the past couple of years. When we had hundreds of thousands of subscribers, it was a lot harder to track content than when you have millions of subscribers. And if you have millions of subscribers and have better content, you're able to attract more customers. And if you have more customers, you have more revenue, which allows you to invest more in technology and marketing and content, which allows you to reach an even wider audience. And if you reach an even wider audience, you then have the ability to start developing these new revenue streams, interactive advertising and transactions. And that creates this dynamic where the big get bigger. And these integrated offerings, I think, really will be the mass market phenomenon.
This gentle questioner, however, says America Online has goofed in its billing practices. What are you doing about this management problem?
Well, we probably goofed in a lot of things over the past 10 years. What we do when we goof is we address the issue as quickly and in such a forthright fashion as we possibly can. And that's what we'll continue to do.
And what safeguards are in place to protect credit card purchases through AOL?
Well, it varies depending on the service. Some services have extra levels of security. American Express, for example, you have to have a special password to get into their area. That's really under the control of each of our partners. But one of the benefits of buying things on AOL today versus buying things on the internet is it inherently is more secure because of a somewhat more closed client-server kind of architecture. The challenge of the internet, and it's being addressed at a fairly rapid clip, and indeed we are investors along with Netscape and CompuServe and other companies in an entity called Teresa to try to standardize security on the internet, is it's a much more complicated problem to have a distributed global open network secure than it is to have a somewhat more limited closed system secure. So it's more secure today with the existing services such as AOL and CompuServe, and we're working together with a lot of people in the industry to try to make it equally secure, perhaps even more secure down the road on the internet.
This questioner says that AOL still has the worst web browser.
Thank you.
And what do you plan to do about it?
Well, I don't think that's entirely true, but it's partially true. Did Walt Mossberg ask this question?
No.
Just had to know. We are about to launch a new version of our Windows software and soon a new version of our Macintosh software that addresses a number of common complaints from members, one of which is the web browser, and it supports what's called HTML 3.0 extensions and Netscape extensions, so it really will improve significantly. We also are in discussions with a number of companies in the industry about ways to partner together to leverage some common architectures, because if we can do things from a technology standpoint in partnership with others that better meet the needs of our members, we will do that.
How much does one of those famous AOL discs that you seem to send out to everyone cost? And how much churn do you have in AOL membership? What is the highest acceptable acquisition cost per subscriber?
Well, we do buy a lot of discs, and we do get a good price. We think there is an easier way to get from where we are to where we need to go, and we think it would be good if the IRS would, on your tax form, just have a checkoff box. Do you currently subscribe to AOL? And if you don't, we'll send you the disc, and we can eliminate a lot of duplication and waste. So I hope you'll take up that cause with us for the betterment of mankind. In terms of the acceptable cost from an acquisition standpoint, our business model has been consistent for quite some time, which is we're willing to spend up to 10% of the lifetime revenue we generate from a customer to acquire a customer. Right now we're spending quite a bit less than that 10% number.
What's your strategy on the educational aspects, and what is AOL doing to reach parents, schools, those potential audience multipliers?
Well, we have been focusing for most of the past decade on the consumer market, really trying to address people at home. But we recognize there's two other markets that exist, and over time they really will integrate and unify in a way that really is quite interesting. One is the area of businesses, and the other is the area of education, and we're doing things on both fronts. So there's lots of businesses that are getting connected together within their company and with other companies they do business with, and bringing our millions of customers together with those companies really adds a lot of value, and you're starting to see that, and you'll see a lot more of that. And the same is true on the educational side, that right now most schools are left out of this. Some have some form of access, most do not. And as I mentioned before, we're doing things such as Net Day this Saturday in California to wire together schools and provide free AOL access, and we are doing that in other areas as well, because we think that's an important contribution we can make, but also it benefits by bringing these three spheres together in a more unified way, which is going to be critical, we think, to really reach a mainstream audience.
If AOL does not already offer this service, when will a book review listing service be offered?
Well, I actually believe we already do offer a service like that, but I could be wrong. One of the downsides of running a fast-growing company is you no longer know everything that's going on. In fact, you probably don't know most of what's going on. But I do believe we have a book kind of review service, and if we don't, I suspect we'll have one soon. And if not, of course, you can always go out through our World Wide Web browser and get it somewhere on the web.
TV networks are bowing to pressure from Washington and the public and are rating their programs, our online services, the next media to face this sort of pressure to regulate their own content.
Well, actually, we've already received that pressure, and part of the Communications Act has this Communications Decency Act that I referenced before that really does create some very difficult standards in terms of making this possible. Our view is that it's really better to empower the customers of the service to decide what's best for them and their families, which is why we've made such a heavy investment, as have other companies, in tools. And we're working together with industry groups to try to come up with common frameworks. One particular consortium is called PICS, which is basically designed to do the same kind of ratings for content as you see in television, or soon we'll see in television.
It's just gone too quickly, but we're near the end, and so I want to present our Certificate of Appreciation and a National Press Club mug. And I want to ask the last question, which is, how many of the AOL subscribers are there for sex?
I actually don't know the number. I don't even know how to keep track of that. We do know that with 5 million members, one of the key principles of this medium is diversity. And people can kind of self-select, and if people want to go to the personal finance area, they can. If they want to go to the sports area, they can. If they want to participate in discussions, they can. Each of our members really is in control of their own destiny and their own interactive experience, and that's what this is all about, really trying to build a medium that can reach a mainstream audience and provide the kind of direction for the industry that can get us from where we are to where we need to go. And we do recognize that we've grown rapidly in the past couple of years, and we're pleased by the growth. But at the end of the day, 5 million people subscribe to AOL, which is about 5% of households, which means sort of 5% down, 95% to go. So there's a long road ahead to really make this medium, and AOL in particular, all it can be. So thank you for your interest.
Thank you, Mr. Case. Thank you for coming today, and I'd like to thank staff members Melissa Bender and Chad Taylor and Melanie Abdu-Dermont and Howard Rothman for organizing today's luncheon.
Whatever you think.
Thank you.
Good to see you again. Big fans of your One of the great pleasures today was